I want to start with something that happened in a home in Edinburgh, Scotland. A woman lost her husband after 40 years of marriage, and in the weeks that followed, while she was trying to learn how to exist inside a grief that had no edges, her cat stopped eating. He didn't stop completely, enough to keep going, but he lost weight. He slept in different places. He stopped sitting in the spots he had always chosen, and every single morning for weeks, he would walk to the front door, sit down, and wait. Her husband had always left through that door first in the morning. The cat was not confused. The cat was not being difficult. The cat was doing the only thing he knew how to do with an absence that made no sense to him. He was grieving. And here is what I want you to understand before this video goes any further. For years, decades, scientists resisted that word when it came to animals. Grief requires things we were not sure animals had: specific attachment, recognition of permanent absence, a nervous system capable of sustaining loss over time. The research now says cats have all of it. Today, we are going into exactly what that research found, what cat grief actually looks like, what it does to their body, what the documented cases of cats grieving their humans reveal about the depth of this bond, and what it tells us about what was there all along. Let's go. 1. What grief actually requires. Before we get into what cats do, we need to spend 60 seconds on what grief actually is, because this is where the science gets interesting. Grief is not just sadness. Grief is a specific response to a specific kind of loss, and it requires 3 things that not every animal has. The first is individuated attachment. You cannot grieve a category. You cannot grieve the idea of something. You grieve a specific being, an irreplaceable presence whose absence creates a hole that nothing else fills. The research on cat attachment is extensive and clear. Cats form specific, individuated bonds. They don't just attach to humans in general. They attach to their human, their specific person, irreplaceably. The second requirement is recognition of permanent absence. The animal must be able to register not just that someone is gone right now, but that they are not coming back, that the absence is not temporary, that waiting will not resolve it. And the third is a nervous system capable of sustaining the physiological stress response that loss produces, not just in the moment of separation, but across days, weeks, months. Cats meet every single one of these requirements. The question was never whether cats had the architecture for grief. The question was whether they used it. The answer is yes, completely. And the documentation of how they use it is one of the most significant bodies of evidence we have for the depth of what cats feel. 2. What cat grief actually looks like. In 1996, the ASPCA conducted what remains one of the most comprehensive surveys of feline grief ever assembled. They interviewed over 160 cat owners who had lost a companion animal from a multi-cat household. And what they documented was not scattered or anecdotal. It was consistent, systematic, repeated across household after household after household. More than half of the surviving cats showed significant changes in their eating behavior, some eating less, some barely eating at all. Nearly 70% showed changes in vocalization. Some became unusually loud, calling out repeatedly in rooms where the absent companion used to be. Others went almost completely silent in a way their owners described as unsettling, as if the voice had somewhere to go and now didn't. Significant portions searched. They moved through the home methodically, investigating the spots the absent animal had frequented, sniffing the bedding, the food bowl, the sleeping surfaces. The same searching behavior we see in humans moving through a home after a loss, looking for the person in the places they used to be. Sleep changed, activity levels dropped, play behavior decreased or disappeared entirely. Some cats withdrew in ways their owners had never seen before, choosing isolation over the social engagement that had always characterized them. And in many cases, these changes persisted for months, not days, months. In some cats, behavioral patterns shifted and never fully returned to what they had been before the loss. This is not projection. This is not owners seeing what they wanted to see. This is a statistical pattern consistent across hundreds of households in animals experiencing the measurable physiological and behavioral consequences of losing someone specific and irreplaceable from their world. 3. What grief does to their body. Here is the part of this story that moves from emotionally significant to medically urgent, because most people do not know this, and not knowing it has cost cats their lives. Grief in cats is not only an emotional event, it is a physiological one, and it can become dangerous very quickly. The sustained stress response of grief, elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, reduced appetite, has documented effects on feline physical health that go beyond behavior. Immune function decreases under chronic stress. The gut microbiome shifts. The body begins running on less than it needs. But the specific risk that veterinarians see most, the one that makes feline grief a medical concern and not just an emotional one, is hepatic lipidosis. When a cat stops eating or significantly reduces their food intake, the body begins breaking down fat stores for energy. The liver processes these fat stores, but the cat liver is not designed to handle large volumes of fat processing over an extended period. It becomes overwhelmed. It begins to fail. Hepatic lipidosis can develop in a previously healthy cat in as little as 2 to 4 days of significantly reduced food intake. It is serious. It can be fatal, and veterinarians see it in grieving cats. Cats brought in after a loss, whose owners assumed the reduced appetite was emotional and would pass on its own. It does not pass on its own. If your cat is grieving, if they have lost a companion, lost a person, experienced a significant loss of any kind, monitor their food intake every single day, not casually, specifically. How much did they eat today? If the answer is significantly less than normal for more than 24 hours, take it seriously. Call your vet. Their emotional health and their physical health are not separate systems. In grief, they go together, and the emotional symptom you can see may be the early warning sign of the physical crisis you cannot yet see.
Now let's talk about the cases that are harder to look at directly. Because the ASPCA survey was about cats grieving other animals. But what happens when a cat loses their person? The documented cases of cats grieving human owners through death, through prolonged absence, through abandonment, paint a picture that resists easy categorization. There is a cat named Toldo from a small town in Montagnana, Italy. When his owner, Miguel, passed away, Toldo attended the funeral, and then, the following day, he returned to the grave. He has been returning regularly ever since. Not occasionally, regularly. Sometimes bringing small offerings, a stick, a leaf, once a plastic cup, and leaving them at the grave before settling in to stay for a while. This has been documented, photographed, observed by the family and the community over years. Veterinary behaviorists who have studied this case do not have a framework that fully explains it outside of grief. An animal returning to the location of a lost attachment figure, bringing objects, a behavior associated with social bonding in cats, staying, being present at the place where the person last was. And Toldo was not alone. There are multiple documented cases of cats remaining in the area of their owner's death for extended periods, returning to specific locations, refusing to integrate the absence into their movement patterns in the way a cat who had simply lost interest would. What is happening in these cats, at the neurological level, is the ongoing operation of an attachment system that has lost its anchor. The brain keeps sending the cat toward the last known location of the bonded individual, keeps activating the seeking behaviors associated with finding someone important, keeps running the search because the search has not yet resolved. Your cat built themselves around you, your rhythms, your chemistry, your presence moving through the home at specific times of day. You are not background to your cat. You are structural. You are part of how they understand where they are and what is safe and what the day is supposed to feel like. And when that structure disappears, the brain does not simply file it and move on. It keeps looking. That is grief. That is exactly and precisely what grief is. Here is the thing I want to leave you with. You can only grieve what you loved. You can only lose what was real. The depth of the grief is a direct and precise measurement of the depth of the bond that preceded it. When a cat searches a home for weeks, when they sit by a door that will not open anymore, when they stop eating because the absence of a specific being has disrupted something so fundamental to their sense of safety that their body cannot simply continue as before, when their personality shifts in ways that persist for months, what all of that behavior is documenting is the size of what was there. Cats do not grieve things that did not matter to them. They do not reorganize their internal world around losses that were not real losses. The grief is not a symptom of weakness or over-attachment. The grief is the evidence. The grief is the proof. Every single documented case of feline grief is simultaneously, inseparably, a documentation of feline love. Not the comfortable, convenient version of cat love that we tell ourselves about. Not the version that lets us feel good without requiring us to feel the weight of responsibility that comes with being genuinely needed. The real version, the costly, vulnerable, built into the biology version. The kind that shows up in searching behavior and changed vocalization and a cat sitting by a door every morning because the person who used to leave through it was the organizing principle of their whole world. They loved, they lost, they carry it. That is the answer to the question this video asked, and it was always the answer. The grief just makes it impossible to look away from. Before we close, because this video is not only about understanding, it is about what you do with understanding. If your cat is grieving right now, or if they ever do, here is what the research actually supports. Do not rush to introduce a replacement. This is the instinct most people have, and it almost always makes things worse in the short term. A grieving cat is already in a state of disrupted safety. Their territory, which is also their psychological container, has been destabilized. Introducing a new animal into that destabilized territory before the grieving cat has found any equilibrium adds threat to an already overwhelmed system. It can extend and complicate the grief significantly. Wait, be patient. Let the cat tell you when they are ready by watching their behavior over weeks, not days. Give them consistency. Keep everything else in their world as unchanged as possible. Feeding times, locations, routines. The more the environment holds its shape, the more stable the cat's nervous system can be while it processes the loss. Give them your presence. Physical proximity to a trusted human is one of the most reliable reducers of the cortisol response in a grieving cat. You do not need to perform comfort. You do not need to do anything specific. Simply being nearby, calm, stable, available, provides the physiological signals their nervous system is looking for. And monitor the food every day. That is not optional. That is the one thing that turns an emotional process into a medical emergency if it goes unnoticed. Watch what they eat every single day. If you have watched a cat grieve, yours or someone else's, I hope this video gave you the language for what you saw. It was real. You did not project it. You did not imagine it. You witnessed one of the most honest and costly things this animal is capable of. And if your cat is here right now, whole and present and curled somewhere nearby, hold this knowledge too. Because understanding that your cat is capable of this depth of loss also means understanding that they are capable of this depth of love. Both things are true.
They come from the same place. They are the same thing, seen from two sides of time. If this video gave you something real today, hit the like button before you go. It helps Animora CodeX reach more people who love their animals and want to understand them at this level. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Every week we go deeper into the hidden life your cat is living right alongside yours. And share this one, because somewhere right now there is a person watching a cat grieve and wondering if what they are seeing is real. It is. Send them this. See you in the next one.